Technology is so fabulous. What a joy to be able to connect in with each one where they are. So I'm so grateful to Bonnie, Jerry, Virginia, Roberta, Eric, all who joined us from their own home. We are continuing on in a new series that started last week called Lessons of the Turtle. We have a book that we are using for this. It was written by Steve Goodyear, and it's all about how to live right side up, given the lessons from the turtle. And so you recall, last week I shared the story, the beginning of this, the accident, where the turtle is wandering along and finds himself slipping on a loose rock. And as he does so, he lands upside down. And everybody knows when a turtle lands upside down, it is not good news for that turtle. And so the turtle is sitting there afraid, wondering what's going to happen when the owl comes along. And the owl comes along to remind the turtle to open his eyes and take a look around, but the turtle is too afraid to do so. Finally, the owl reminds him to be curious, to be open to wonder, and as the turtle does so, he opens up his eyes and he discovers the sky and the birds, and he sees the wonder around him. So we talked last week about how we have each had experiences in our life where, like the turtle, we were knocked off of our center. And we find ourselves perhaps feeling like our world has turned upside down. And so last week, you were invited to pay attention where, like the turtle, you were afraid to open your eyes to the wonder of whatever that moment might provide. And I have to be honest, I didn't get an email from any of you sharing with me how you were doing your spiritual practice this week. But I have no doubt that you are practicing that. And I am grateful to know that you are all out there with me, practicing to have this holy, sacred curiosity and wonder about life. So our story goes on this week. The story becomes the gift of the accident, and the turtle and the owl continue their conversation. So this is what we have to hear. "I'm curious about your predicament," Owl said to Turtle, startling him free of his reverie. "You say that the accident could have happened to anyone then?" "Oh, yes. How was I to know the rock was loose?" "Why is it then," Owl pursued, "that you find yourself on your back? I see no other turtles floundering as you." "Well, because the other turtles walked the trail from the water to the green grass. I was tired of always going the same way, so I took a new route. But I didn't know there would be loose rocks." "So," said the owl, "you chose to go your own way?" "Yes, I decided which way to go." "Oh, that is great power you possess," said the owl. "It's the power to choose your own way. The accident happened to you because you chose a different way. How would you have felt if you made it to the stream without falling?" "I would have felt wonderful," said the turtle. "I found a new and shorter way to the green grass and back, but it wasn't a good choice. It'll probably kill me." "Not every choice will work out as you expect, but in the end, the choices you make will make you. There is a hidden gift in your accident. You have discovered that you possess the power to choose your way through life. You do not need to follow another's path, for not every path is right for you. And if you get out of this predicament, then you may choose later to follow yet different paths." "If I get out of this," said the turtle. "You may yet survive," said the owl. "Many folks survive. Many live long lives, but not all live whole and happy lives. In fact, not that many of us live fully. Now that your eyes are opened, you can begin to live. Live as you've never lived before. Perhaps your accident was no accident," said the owl, "for in it there is a gift." "What kind of gift?" asked the turtle. "A gift in the form of a lesson, which, if applied, can change the rest of your life." "What is the gift?" Turtle wondered. Owl looked him over for a moment, as if deciding whether he was worthy to receive such a pearl of wisdom. Owl then went on to explain. "The gift of the accident is the lesson of choice. Those who understand the gift will choose their own ways through life." The gift of the accident. The power to choose. Steve Goodyear goes on within this chapter to tell us that we can choose our own way and we can choose to live right side up. We can choose to accept responsibility for ourselves, and that responsibility is nothing more than the ability to respond. We can choose the path of victor. Life sometimes is unfair, and we can be victimized. But the greater truth is, people can decide whether they are victims or victors. They can feel helpless and miserable, or they can decide to be strong. The gift of choice. Now we know in Unity, we just finished this 12 Power series where we learned that one of our powers is the ability to choose. It's the gift of our will, but that power has to be centered within also our power of understanding. And so each of us needs to understand that we do have the power to rise above victimhood and to be the victor of our lives. As I've been reading this chapter, it reminded me of the work of Michael Beckwith and his life visioning. I brought to you some of that information when I first arrived at Unity Spiritual Center Westlake. In that, Michael Beckwith tells us that there are 4 levels of consciousness. The first level is the level of victim consciousness. Like the turtle, we are stuck in that place of victim. Why is this happening to me? Victim consciousness is all about what's happening to me. But Michael reminds us, just as Steve Goodyear does in this book, that we don't have to stay in that victim consciousness, that we can rise above that to victor consciousness. And we do that as we begin willing to ask a different question. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? I change one little word. And I ask the question, why is this happening for me? There is some great gift here in this moment, something for me to learn. And so in those moments when I get knocked off center, when I feel like my whole world is turned upside down, I have the choice in that moment. I can be in that place of why is this happening to me and stay in that victim consciousness. Or I can rise above it and ask, why did this happen for me? What is here for me to learn in this moment? Of course, Michael goes on to tell us that there are 2 other levels of consciousness. Beyond victor consciousness is vessel consciousness, where we begin to understand that that very life and spirit of God is moving through us, that we are a vessel for that spirit to express. And the 4th level of consciousness in life visioning is being consciousness, recognizing that I am that very divine essence of God expressing uniquely as me. But we're going to stay with victim and victor consciousness for this message. So we know that we each have that spirit of divine within us, that we can move out of the place of victimhood to that place of being open to what I can learn from this. And what we discover is that if I am willing to move from victim conscious to victor consciousness, I have to become aware of the ways that I am reacting to life. Because victim consciousness comes from that place of reaction. I recognize when I react, and most often where it comes from is from a place of defensiveness. When my buttons get pushed, when my defenses come up, my walls of protection surround me. And I react in anger or in upset. And I can get there just like that. And then I remember, oh, here I am reacting to this moment. Let me take a breath, because for me, it's always the breath that centers me. And let me come back to remembering the truth. That right here, right now, all is in perfect order. And this is unfolding as a gift for me in this moment to learn something about myself. And as I understand that, then I am able to take responsibility for the way that I'm responding in that moment. And I can choose again. I can choose to center in that loving wisdom. I can choose to respond from that place of understanding. This is how we move from victim consciousness to victor consciousness. This is the gift of the accident. Now, Unity does teach in our 3rd principle that we are all creating our world through the activity of our mind, that if we want to change what's happening in our world, we have the ability to do so by changing our mind about it. We can change our mind from, why is this happening to me, to holding the thought, why is this happening for me? We can change our mind about what we believe about ourselves. We can change our mind that we are not worthy or not enough, and we can instead choose to remember the truth. We always have the ability to change our mind, and it is in the consciousness of our thoughts that we begin to change the reality of the life that we are experiencing. So Unity does teach that we all have the ability to rise above victimhood, to know the truth of who we are, and to live from that place by taking charge of the thoughts that we're holding in mind. This is true divine order and power. But I also want to acknowledge that there are times in life where we can be victimized. It is not that victimization doesn't occur. So I might be a victim, for example, of a robbery. I might be a victim, well, at one point our family was a victim of a fire that burnt our house down. I might be the victim of a car accident that somebody hits me. So we can be victimized. There are experiences that can happen that can cause us to be victimized. But the important point to remember is that I don't have to stay stuck in that moment where I became victimized. Because in that moment where I became victimized, where I became the victim, from that moment on, I can choose how I'm going to respond to that experience. So I can choose to respond from my place of power. I can choose to respond from my place of love. I can choose to respond from my place of compassion. This is where in New Thought and in Unity, we have to be very careful. I know you've heard me talk about metaphysical malpractice before. And this is where we can take an experience that someone is going through where they have perhaps been victimized, and we can say to them, oh, what in your consciousness drew this to you? So if you're experiencing a health challenge, well, what were you thinking that you brought this health challenge to you? And in Unity, we now recognize that that is considered metaphysical malpractice, that there are lots of reasons why things do happen to us. We are a part, for example, of the collective human consciousness, co-creating our world together. We are not individually creating every experience in the world, but we are together in consciousness, creating all that we are moving through together. Now, why is this important, especially at this particular time? Those of you who follow me on social media know that my voice has been pretty loud over the last couple of weeks about the racial tensions that are taking place. I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago here in our Sunday service. And I said that there is a system that is in place within our country that is based on racial bias, that racially discriminates against people based on the color of their skin. It is a system of victimization. And so on social media, I've gotten into lots of discussions about this. And on a different Unity Ministers page, I responded to somebody, and this is the way it went. So the minister of that page put out an article. Here are some things that if you are white, you can do to support those people of color in your life and in the world. And it was an article that just offered some suggestions. And somebody responded to that and said, "This is disgusting." And I couldn't figure out what was disgusting. So I asked, can you help me to understand what you find disgusting here? And I was really kind of surprised by the response. And that's what I want to talk to you about here in this idea of metaphysical malpractice, where we have to be careful about these ideas of moving from victimhood to victorhood. And so this was this person's response. Well, the whole basis of New Thought is that we can create our own realities through the thoughts that we think. I'm not responsible for the injustices that I'm not a part of. I'm not racist. I have nothing to do with racism. I have nothing to do with anything that goes on outside of my home. Racism exists because it was programmed into the mind of the victim. They think it exists because it is their reality that they have created. White people have nothing to apologize for. The police force has nothing to apologize for. Others need to go into meditation and get rid of their evil thoughts. Whew. I took a breath when I read that. Because this is metaphysical malpractice so obviously, right? I'm not responsible for the injustices happening in the world. What are you thinking? What evil thoughts are you thinking that is drawing this experience to you? I want us to be careful not to do that. There is a system in place, as I said, that victimizes people of color. Now, that doesn't mean that those people of color need to stay in that place of victimhood, and many people of color that I know are not in a place of victimhood. They are owning their voice and they are owning their power. But I also know that there is a system of injustice in place, and that I, as part of humanity, have added to that consciousness. And so I need to think about, where am I thinking thoughts of lack, limitation, separation, othering? Where am I in a place of fear? Because you see, when I hold those thoughts in my mind, I am adding to the collective human consciousness that creates systems based on separation and lack and limitation and othering. And each and every one of us has a spiritual responsibility to find those areas within our own mind and change our mind. You see, we all have biases that have been programmed into us through this experience of living. And as you and I become clear of those biases that we hold, we can then withdraw our energy from the systems that create the injustices. But to think that you and I have no responsibility for those systems, that is an error of thinking. And it is not, please hear me, what Unity is teaching. And it is not what I am teaching in this message from Lesson of the Turtle, which says that we don't have to remain in victimhood, that we can choose our response, that we can rise above it. Yes, yes, and yes. And we cannot hide from the injustices that are occurring around us without also being responsible to ask, how are the thoughts that I'm holding adding to this? Because we are not only here to rise above the victimhood of our own life, but we are here to support humanity to rise above that victimization that has occurred probably since humanity began, probably since othering began, since the idea of separation began. So this is what I want to share with you today. And I love the scripture. I found this scripture to go with this message. It comes from the book of Romans, chapter 13, verse 11. And this is what it says. And do this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to wake up out of sleep. For now our salvation is nearer than we first believed. This is true for you and I on an individual basis. Now is the time. Wake up from your sleep. Stop reacting to life. Stop worrying about, why is this happening to me? Now is the time to wake up and claim our salvation. This is happening for me. This is happening for humanity. These tensions that have arisen, this virus, this worldwide pandemic that has happened, it has arisen not to happen to us, but for us. What are we learning through this? What can I open my mind to learn through this? Because now is the time to wake up from our sleep of ignorance, from our sleep of othering, from our sleep of fear. Now is the time. Our salvation is at hand, and you and I are the ones to bring this salvation into full expression. We've got some practice to do, and so I have a spiritual practice for you, of course, this week. And so this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to make a list of areas in your life that you feel are ready to change. Where are you ready for change? And as you consider each of those areas of your life, consider how you have contributed to that current situation. How have you reacted that has allowed this current situation to be what it is? How have you forgotten your truth that you have contributed to allowing this current situation to exist? And then take the power back. Deny, I'm not a victim. No one is a victim. Affirm, I can make changes. I will change the situation. I choose joy. And then be responsible for the choices that you make this week. When you find yourself once more in the place of, why is this happening to me? Why does this always happen to me? When you find yourself falling into that pattern of thinking, recognize, I can make a different choice. I can choose my response. And that response can be a response based in creativity, a response based in loving wisdom, a response based in understanding. And you and I have the power to make a response based in love. And the time is at hand to wake up and do that now. So I'm trusting that you're going to send me some emails this week.